who's going to be playing at the European Championships in Dortmund as the race concludes this weekend with the final Euro Tour event of season 2023. Aside from Chris Dobey, who's currently one win away from knocking Steve Beaton out and moving into, well, not even the last. He could be moving up as far as with one win to 29th on countback, but would knock Steve Beaton out. So other than Chris Dobey, who's right there, is there anyone else you could see sneaking into the field?
Yeah, I think all eyes are going to be on Chris Dobey for this race to the European Championship, but there are several other players that are still in the mix going into this weekend. I mean, the field, it is mostly set for the tournament. At the time of recording, we don't have the draw for this weekend's last European Tour event of the year. We could well see a couple of players pull out. You never know. You could see some of the top players think, you know what, I'm going to have a weekend off, try and get a weekend off before the rest of the major events coming up. And if that does happen, Mike De Decker, currently 34th on that list, he is the second alternate. So if two players drop out, he's going to be in, and he's only a grand off Steve Beaton. So again, he could be someone that comes into the fray in the next few days if players pull out. And Steve Beaton, coincidentally, I believe he's the third alternate player. So if we have three pull out, he could have a chance to climb up those rankings. Otherwise, he's going to need a few favours this weekend because he didn't qualify for this European Tour event when the qualifiers are on. But aside from those players, looking further below, there's a lot of work for these players to do to get in. I think you've got Dylan Slevin is the next closest that's qualified for this weekend. He's going to need a quarter-final minimum. Then you've got the likes of Alan Suter, Ryan Joyce, Mickey Mansell, Lee Evans. All these players are going to need a semi-final. Then you've got other players that are going to need a final or a title. It's tough to predict without seeing a draw, but we can go off recent performances. And I know a lot of his success this year has been on the floor, but the player that I'm going to pick out is one that I've just mentioned, Ryan Joyce. He could be an outsider to sneak in because he's made two finals in Players' Championships this year. The first one of those, you've only got to go as far back as July. He's had a semi-final as well in early September, and the last Players' Championship event that we had only 2 weeks ago got to the final, and it was an impressive run, beating Christian Kist. We all know how well he's been playing recently. Beat Michael Van Gerwen with a 105 average, Johnny Clayton with a just under a ton average, then fell short against Gary Anderson, who we know, again, a player that's been in some excellent form himself. So some big runs that we've seen there from Ryan Joyce. And, okay, they've not been on the stage, which is where the Euro Tour is going to be played this weekend. But I think he's got a chance. And his last European Tour event that he played, I think it was European Tour 10 a couple of months ago, beat Dave Chisnall on his way to get into the last 16. And looking at his results on the Euro Tour, his best run ever has been a last 16. So he's going to have to break new ground, set a Euro Tour PB, get to a quarter-final and then get to a semi-final to be in with a chance. But I think based on the player's form this year, I think he is certainly someone to watch. And I think it's worth mentioning as well that for some people that are new, that the draw for the European Championship, it is based on this order of merit. So first in the rankings, we'll play 32nd. And as things stand provisionally, Ross Smith, the defending champion of the European Championships, in 21st. He's the first alternate for this weekend. He would play the World Match Play champion, Nathan Aspinall, the 12th seed. And, okay, these positions could change, but what a first-round draw that would be in a few weeks' time. And just lastly, the race for top spot, Dave Chisnall. He's won 3 Euro Tours this year. The only way that he's going to miss out on that first seed, I think, is if Luke wins the title, Luke Humphries, that is, and Chizzy goes out before the final. So plenty to keep an eye on this weekend.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with Chris Dobey, even though the question says otherwise. You know, as I mentioned in the intro to the question, he just needs one win to crack into the field and would almost certainly guarantee him that spot because it would require an absurd set of results for him to miss out if he wins. One, it would require both Ricardo Pietreczko and Midas Razma to win, which would mean then Dobey's down to 31st. He would need to lose his next match, and then he would need either a ridiculous final or a bunch of players making the semifinals or finals. It's unlikely. So Dobey, a win, and he's probably into the event. But there are other people who can cross in, and you mentioned Ryan Joyce. I think he is the best bet because of how well he's playing. You mentioned the two finals so far this year in Players' Championship events. And I think he's been a little unfortunate not to go further a couple other times. I think he's playing maybe not the best starts we've seen from him since joining the PDC, because he's won a title before and he has made the World Match Play and World Grand Prix before, and I don't think he's playing at that level. But I think he's playing more consistently over the past few months than we've seen from him in the past. And if you're playing consistently, that'll make you a force in any tournament, because you should be bringing a standard that can win any match. It doesn't mean it will win any match. You could lose first match, but it means you could win, and that means you are a good chance to pull off a run at any given tournament. And right now, depending on what Dobie does, depending on what Ricardo Pietreczko does, a semifinal might be enough to get him in. If one of those two players who I just mentioned loses and there aren't any withdrawals, I'll get to that in a second, then Ryan Joyce would get in the semifinal. Otherwise, he'd need a final. Everyone else behind him, other than people tied with him, would need most likely to make a final in that situation. Although Martin Lukeman could get in the semifinal, and Martin Lukeman is playing better right now than he was earlier in the year. Some of the players further down who need a title to get in. How about Jules Van Dongen? I don't think he's going to win a title, but he's been throwing in 105, 106 averages for fun recently. Jules Van Dongen is a force right now. It would be really surprising if he won the title, but it wouldn't be that surprising. He has the game, and he's putting himself in that position to do it. Other players have even more work to do, so I'm not going to mention them. But I want to get into what happens if someone withdraws. If one person withdraws, Ross Smith is the first alternate. He's in the European Championships. He's currently the 21st seed. He has nothing to worry about. Second alternate, that's Mike de Decker. Where's Mike de Decker? He's just 1,000 pounds outside of the field. 1,250 pounds is what you get for the first round. If he gets into this field as an alternate, suddenly he is moved into the field. Suddenly, Ricardo Pietreczko is the last man in, and Chris Dobie is the next one, which means Dobie might have to win 2 matches at that point, depending on other things. One win would still be possibly enough if Mike de Decker loses, but if Mike de Decker wins, now he's up to 17-5, and there's even more work that Chris Dobie would have to do, and Ricardo Pietreczko is suddenly in danger as well. Mike de Decker could play his way in, even though he's currently not qualified for the event, because Guren Price has withdrawn from quite a few of these. Michael Smith has withdrawn from some. Michael Van Guren has withdrawn from some. Yes, there's now penalties if you withdraw from many of these, but that is less of a deterrent when you are winning major titles like Michael Van Guren is this year, or making major finals like Guren Price is. So there is that chance that 2 of the players will withdraw, and Mike de Decker will backdoor his way into the field. And I'll also mention Steve Beaton. Right now, he's the last person in. If Chris Dobie loses his first round match, that probably, but not guaranteed, probably will mean Beaton goes, unless there's obviously withdrawals and Mike de Decker gets in. But Steve Beaton's the third alternate. So if 3 players withdraw, unlikely, but possible, now Steve Beaton's in the field, and that makes it all the more difficult for other people to get in, because it's no longer Beaton as the player to catch. It's Ricardo Pietreczko, who is, as one of the host nation qualifiers, could be adding on with 1 win a bunch of money. Brendan Dolan might be the player you need to catch on 16-5. So Beaton could find his way back in if he gets in as an alternate. Mike Decker could get in by right as an alternate. Chris Dobie's right there. And as I mentioned, the most likely of the players further back, Ryan Joyce. But as I said, don't sleep on Jules Van Dongen. He needs a title. It's very unlikely, but he's been throwing in enough 106 averages that it is possible.